the great Roger Stone. Roger, always good to see you. Welcome back.
Great to be here, Ed.
You know, this week we saw the Democrat edge shrink to 3 points on the generic ballot. Who do you want to control Congress, the Democrats or the Republicans? The left was leading, as you know, by 10 points when they took the House in 2018. Do you think people are waking up to the dangers of socialism?
Very definitely. First of all, I think the American people realize the Democrats have no plan for America, no plan to create jobs, no plan to bring down energy prices, no plan for more affordable and more available housing, no plans to make our streets and neighborhoods safe again. They're running on one thing, and their hatred of Donald Trump. That's their platform. I just summed it up. And now what you've seen is the old Democrat Party, a Democrat Party that believed in capitalism, free enterprise, strong national defense, believed in God. That Democrat Party, the party of John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman, that party literally no longer exists. It's been taken over by socialists who are, in fact, Marxists. And what they're selling is repression, authoritarianism in the name of free food, free education, free healthcare, free everything, as if nobody will pay. We've seen the results of this in Cuba, for example. So this is going to be a stark contrast in the fall. The president and his advisors clearly know it, and they're laying out those differences even as we speak.
What happens? Yeah, go ahead.
Best speeches I ever heard him give.
Yeah, absolutely. What they do in Cuba as well, pardon me, is throw dissenters in prison. So let's talk liberal lawfare. You, unfortunately, are an expert on that. Jim Jordan has now sent a criminal referral to DOJ, referring special counsel Jack Smith for prosecution because it looks like he lied to Congress about spying on lawmakers, various Republican members of Congress going through their text messages. Now, we saw one person on X joking that Jack Smith should receive the full Roger Stone treatment with a SWAT team banging on Jack Smith's door at 3 a.m. What do you say to that and what Jack Smith did?
You know, Ed, I used to think the Russian collusion hoax was the greatest single dirty trick in American history, but I now believe that Arctic Frost, Jack Smith's investigation, could be the greatest single abuse of power in American history. It was the use of the full authority of the United States government to spy on members of Congress. Jack Smith said that he didn't read the text messages from 40 Trump supporters and members of Congress. Now it turns out that he did. Now, I was charged with lying to Congress, yet no misstatement I made under oath was material. In other words, there was no Russian collusion for me to lie about. So what would have been my motive not to lie? I did say things that were incorrect, but none of them were material. Jack Smith should be prosecuted because there's a serious separation of powers issue. He, as a member of the executive branch at the direction of Merrick Garland, who was denying it, was spying on Republican members of Congress. You can't get more unconstitutional or treasonous than that.
Yeah, he said under oath that he only looked at the phone numbers, the toll records of who called who or who texted who, and did not look at the text messages. And Chuck Grassley has the emails and details now. He did. So Jack Smith lied under oath.
So the question is, do we have a two-tier justice system, or is there only one tier of justice?
Yeah.
Jack Smith needs to be prosecuted, and he needs to stand trial. These are very serious charges, but it is part and parcel. This week, we also learned that the number 3 guy at the Justice Department was essentially sent to New York to coordinate the state lawfare against Donald Trump, in which they tried to keep him off the ballot, tried to break him financially, tried to send him to jail. So this was one coordinated effort at lawfare, and somebody has to be held responsible.
Absolutely. I mentioned Nixonmaxxing. Wall Street Journal did a big story that young people, pretty wild, are revisiting Richard Nixon's legacy. They're calling it that, as I said, Nixonmaxxing. You were way ahead of the curve. You've written books about this, his place in history, and you've also said Nixon was the first to imagine a Trump presidency. Listen to this.
The first person to imagine a Trump presidency was not me, but was former President Richard Nixon. He met Donald Trump in George Steinbrenner's box at Yankee Stadium, and they hit it off. And he called me the next day, and he said, well, I met your man. I got to tell you, he's got it. He could really go all the way.
Wow.
Nixon was right. What do you make of young people learning about this? What's your take?
I think this is really great. First of all, I give the Vice President, J.D. Vance, huge credit because he kicked this off by speaking the Nixon library and saying correctly that the same deep state forces that took Nixon down tried to take Trump down. That was right on the money. Now, when you combine that with the extraordinary efforts of the young guys at the Nixon Foundation, who are using video clips, memes on various social media to inform people about Nixon, people learn more than Watergate. Watergate was a setup. The CIA knew about the Watergate break-in advance, and they infiltrated the burglar team. We have declassified documents that prove that, but now people can get to learn a lot more and the more important things. A strategic arms limitation with the Soviets, the end of the Vietnam War, the desegregation of the public schools, the saving of Israel in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, doing away with the military draft, the 18-year-old vote, and opening the door to China at a time, Ed, when China was a dirt poor, backwards agrarian society. Few people had indoor plumbing. Few people had electricity, particularly in the rural areas.
Yeah.
It wasn't until years later that Bill Clinton gave them most favored nation trading status, extended by George Bush. That's what made them the enemy they are today, the super enemy they are, not Richard Nixon, who skillfully played them off against the Russians to get that strategic arms limitation treaty.
You've written books on it, as I said. You've got a tattoo of Nixon as well. So you've been there for a long time, my friend. Roger Stone.
Yes, indeed. Many thanks, Ed. God bless you.